Hey everyone. When you look at an NBA slate like this on a Saturday night, there are games that feel routine, and then there are matchups where the line itself is telling a story before the opening tip. Tonight is loaded with those kinds of games. Big numbers, tight spreads, lines that feel uncomfortable, inflated, or flat out disrespectful. And more often than not, that's not by accident, it's because the matchup underneath is forcing oddsmakers to show their hand. This is where we slow the game down. This is where we read between the numbers. Tonight, we're breaking down the slate the way we always do here on Beyond the Box Score. Real analysis, real matchup context, real angles, and no surface level takes. If a number looks strange, there's a reason. If a spread feels heavy, there's a matchup driving it. And that's exactly what we're diving into for this NBA Saturday, December 20th. Now before we get into the breakdowns, quick reminder, supporting the channel is what keeps these daily NBA videos coming. Right now, less than 25% of the people watching are actually subscribed. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, currently sitting at 1,272, and the momentum is building. If you're getting value from the analysis, if these breakdowns help your process, take 1 second, hit that subscribe button, and help grow the Beyond the Box Score community in a big way. Alright, let's get into the games. First game we analyze game, Utah Jazz vs Orlando Magic. When you peel back the surface of this matchup between Utah and Orlando, what immediately stands out is how different the story looks depending on which lens you choose to view it through. Utah enters this game coming off a 14-35 loss to LA, sitting at 10-16 on the year, yet somehow standing at an eye-popping 14-2 against the spread. That alone tells you everything you need to know about how this team has been perceived versus how it has actually performed relative to expectations. Even at home, where Utah sits at 7-8, there is a pattern of offensive volatility that cannot be ignored. This team has put up 135 against the Lakers, 140 in a win over Dallas, and 128 against Sacramento, proving that scoring has not been the issue. Defense, particularly in losses like the one against OKC, has been the breaking point. Still, Utah has shown the ability to hang around in games, splitting a series with Houston and even winning outright as 11 to 12-point underdogs, reinforcing the idea that this team plays its best basketball when expectations are low and pressure is minimal. On the other side, Orlando comes into this matchup at 15 to 12, but the shine dulls quickly when you dig deeper. Their 12 to 15 ATS record paints a very different picture than the straight-up standings. In their most recent performance, a 126 to 115 loss to Denver, exposed some concerning trends. Despite outrebounding Denver, Orlando still allowed the Nuggets to shoot 44% from 3 and 56% from the field, a combination that simply erases any rebounding advantage. Paolo Banchero did record a triple-double, but even that individual brilliance wasn't enough to shift momentum. More concerning is the broader trend. Orlando is just 1-6 against the spread in their last 7 games, and they carry a losing road record, which becomes especially relevant in this spot. Zooming out, Orlando's recent losses have come against quality opponents, Denver, New York twice, San Antonio, and Boston, while their wins include Miami twice, Chicago, and road victories against Philadelphia and Detroit. That schedule context matters, but it does not erase the reality that this team has struggled to meet expectations when stepping up in class. Meanwhile, Utah's offense has consistently punched above its weight, particularly at home, even in games that ultimately slipped away. The market reflects this tension by giving Utah plus 4.5, a number that aligns with how often this team has stayed competitive, even when losing outright. From an analytical standpoint, the spread lean gravitates toward Utah plus 4.5, not because Utah is the better team straight up, but because the Jazz have consistently defied market expectations while Orlando has repeatedly fallen short of them. When Utah scores in the 135 to 140 range, it forces opponents into uncomfortable territory, and Orlando's recent defensive results, especially allowing high-efficiency shooting, leave the door open for another tight contest. In broader scenario discussions, any correlated angle here flows through Utah's ability to score and Orlando's inability to separate, creating a game script where points and possession swings matter more than raw talent gaps. This is a matchup defined by contrast, perception versus reality, and the numbers suggest Utah's role as a plus 4.5 underdog fits the pattern they've thrived in all season. Next game, Los Angeles Clippers vs Los Angeles Lakers. This Los Angeles rivalry has long been marketed as a clash of equals, but the data tells a much harsher truth. The Clippers arrive here after a 122-101 loss to Oklahoma City, dropping them to 6-21 on the year, with an ATS mark of 8-9 and a stated win percentage of .222. Even with names like Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, this team has struggled to translate star power into results. The first meeting against the Lakers this season ended in a 17-point loss, and little since then suggests meaningful improvement. The absence of Bradley Beal, who was expected to serve as the third part of the three-headed monster, before being ruled out for the season with a hip issue, has only amplified the Clippers' structural issues. The phrase used to describe their current form says it all: they have shown diddly squat. The Lakers, meanwhile, continue to stack results in a way that demands respect. They come into this game at 19-7, boasting a 17-9 ATS record, fresh off a 14-35 win over Utah, and having won 7 of their last 10 games. Even in close contests, they've consistently delivered. Recent victories include wins over Toronto by 3, Philadelphia by 4, Phoenix by 2, and Utah by 8, and notably, they covered in all of those games. Historically, the matchup also leans heavily in their favor, as the Lakers have won the last 3 meetings at Crypto.com Arena, reinforcing their dominance even as venues and circumstances evolve. Injuries are always part of the narrative, and for the Lakers, the latest report shows Luka playing and LeBron playing, while DeAndre Ayton and Austin Reeves are out, Gabe Vincent remains out, and Rui Hachimura is listed as questionable. Despite these absences, the Lakers' recent body of work suggests that their top-end availability has been enough to stabilize outcomes. The market reflects this confidence through what is described as a low line, a point of intrigue considering the disparity in records and recent form. From a spread perspective, the lean flows naturally toward the Lakers laying the points. The Clippers' inability to stay competitive, both straight up and within spreads, contrasts sharply with the Lakers' habit of not only winning but covering, even in games decided by narrow margins. Analytical scenario discussions here center on continuity versus collapse. The Lakers' recent trend of winning close games while still covering suggests a floor that the Clippers simply have not shown. Any broader parlay-style observation would stem from pairing Lakers' consistency with Clippers' volatility, a dynamic that has repeated itself throughout this season. Ultimately, this matchup is less about rivalry hype and more about operational reality. 1 team sits at 6-21, searching for answers, while the other stands at 19-7, stacking wins and covers with methodical efficiency. The numbers don't whisper here, they speak loudly. And as this game unfolds, it becomes another chapter in a season where the Lakers continue to define expectations, while the Clippers continue to fall short of them. Next game, Memphis Grizzlies vs Washington Wizards. This matchup between the Memphis Grizzlies and the Washington Wizards is one of those games where the records alone already begin to shape the narrative, but the deeper you go into the numbers, the more defined the contrast becomes. Memphis enters this game at 13-4 on the year, and remarkably, that exact same number shows up again in their performance against expectations, sitting at 13-4 against the spread. Their most recent outing was a 116-110 win over Minnesota, a game that reinforced what this team has quietly been doing all season: winning, covering, and consistently outperforming market assumptions. Zooming in further, the Grizzlies are currently riding a 7-2 ATS run, and what makes that stretch particularly interesting is that they were only favored 4 times during it. In those situations where the pressure flipped and Memphis was expected to lead, they still managed to go 3-1 ATS, a key indicator of adaptability rather than dependency on the underdog role. There's even mention within the data of a potential double-digit win, a phrase that stands out when discussing a team that hasn't always been associated with blowing opponents out but has instead built success through steady execution. Washington, meanwhile, comes into this matchup carrying a far heavier statistical burden. The Wizards sit at 4-21 on the season, with an 8-17 ATS record, numbers that reflect prolonged inconsistency both straight up and relative to expectations. Their most recent performance, a 11-94 loss to San Antonio, adds another layer of frustration, especially when framed by the note that 16 points was not enough in that matchup. The broader philosophy surrounding Washington has been clearly defined within the data itself. When backing the Wizards, the preference has historically leaned toward the moneyline, while fading them has often been framed through double-digit margins. The Wizards' injury situation adds even more uncertainty. Chris Middleton is listed as day-to-day with a knee issue, while Alex Sir is dealing with an adductor strain, casting doubt over lineup continuity. Even so, the roster still includes names like C.J. McCollum, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sir, and Bub Carrington, reinforcing the idea that this is not a team devoid of talent, but rather one struggling to convert talent into consistent results. Washington's season has been defined by extremes. On one hand, there have been competitive moments, including a 1-point loss at Chicago and a 4-point loss to Cleveland, a game where Cleveland was associated with a -17 spread. On the other hand, there have been decisive defeats, with blowout margins of 25, 15, 45, 19, and 33 against Indiana, numbers that illustrate how quickly games can spiral when things go wrong. From a spread-lean perspective, the data naturally pulls toward Memphis, not only because of their 13-4 ATS profile, but because of how consistently they've handled both favored and underdog situations. Any analytical parlay-style scenario discussion here would revolve around Memphis maintaining control and Washington struggling to stay within reach, particularly given the Wizards' history of double-digit outcomes and Memphis' efficiency during their 7-2 ATS stretch. This game is less about mystery and more about confirmation, whether Memphis continues doing exactly what the numbers say they've been doing all season. Now, next game, Boston Celtics vs. Toronto Raptors. This matchup between Boston and Toronto unfolds at the intersection of scheduling, injuries, and historical dominance. Toronto enters the game at 17-11, but their 13-15 ATS record suggests that while they've won games, they haven't consistently exceeded expectations. They come in off a 111-105 win over Milwaukee, closing out a 2-game road trip before returning home, where they hold an 8-6 record this season. However, the biggest storyline surrounding Toronto is absence. R.J. Barrett remains out, a loss that has clearly reshaped their offensive ceiling. The numbers reinforce that impact directly. Toronto has not topped 113 points in any of their last 5 games, a striking trend that frames their offensive limitations without Barrett in the lineup. That absence looms especially large when recalling their previous matchup against Boston, a 121-113 loss, a game where Toronto again played without Barrett. In that contest, Brandon Ingram scored 30 points, yet it still wasn't enough to overcome Boston's balance. Boston arrives in this game navigating a scheduling challenge of their own, playing on the first half of a back-to-back, but their track record in this exact situation has been strong. On no rest, the Celtics are 4-1 against the spread, a detail that carries significant weight when contextualizing fatigue concerns. They also enter this matchup after beating the Miami Heat by double digits, reinforcing recent form even with rotation considerations. Individually, Boston has shown the ability to generate offense from multiple sources. In the previous meeting, Jaylen Brown scored 30 points, while Derek White added 27, a distribution that becomes even more important given that Jason Tatum is out of the lineup. Without Tatum, Boston's success has relied on balance rather than reliance, and the numbers show they've been capable of finding that balance when needed. Historically, this matchup has leaned heavily toward Boston. The Celtics have won 9 of the last 10 meetings against Toronto, a head-to-head trend that continues to surface regardless of venue or roster changes. From a market standpoint, a -1.5 spread is referenced, but the selection leans toward Boston on the moneyline, reflecting the narrow pricing gap and the long-term dominance in this matchup. From an analytical perspective, any parlay-style observation would revolve around Boston's consistency in no-rest situations combined with Toronto's ongoing offensive limitations without Barrett. The spread lean aligns with Boston's historical edge and situational reliability, while Toronto's numbers suggest a narrower margin for error given their inability to surpass 113 points recently. This game becomes a test of whether Toronto can overcome both absence and history, or whether Boston continues doing what it has done in 9 of the last 10 meetings. Next game, New Orleans Pelicans vs. Indiana Pacers. This matchup between New Orleans and Indiana features two teams with identical straight-up records but vastly different recent trajectories. The Pelicans come in at 6-22, yet their performance against expectations tells a far more compelling story, as they sit at the 2nd of October 16 ATS on the season. They're fresh off a 133-128 win over Houston, a victory that pushed their current streak to 3 wins in a row and further extended their impressive 8-1 ATS run over the last 9 games. What makes that ATS run even more notable is that all 9 of those games came in the underdog role. New Orleans has been catching points night after night, yet consistently finding ways to outperform expectations. The Pelicans have only been favored once this season, a game against Charlotte in early November, and they covered that game as well. Now, they find themselves in a rare position of being favored again, laying -2.5 in this matchup. Home court has played a quiet but important role in New Orleans' limited success. Of their 6 total wins, 4 have come at home, reinforcing why this particular spot stands out. Momentum, location, and role alignment all converge here in a way that hasn't happened often for the Pelicans this season. Indiana enters the game also sitting at 6-21, but with a slightly stronger 14-13 ATS record, suggesting they've been more competitive relative to expectations. Still, recent form has tilted downward. The Pacers are coming off a 114-113 loss to New York, a game decided when Jalen Brunson hit a game-winning 3, and that defeat extended their current skid to 3 straight losses. Over their last 10 games, Indiana has managed 4 wins, a modest improvement from earlier stretches but one that hasn't translated into consistent results. Road play has been a major issue for Indiana, as they sit at just 1-11 away from home, a number that becomes impossible to ignore in this context. When paired with New Orleans' recent competitiveness and strong ATS momentum, the contrast sharpens even further. From a spread lean perspective, the numbers align with Pelicans -2.5, not as a statement of season-long dominance, but as recognition of current form, location, and role reversal. Any analytical scenario discussion here would focus on New Orleans continuing their trend of outperforming expectations, this time without needing to rely on points, while Indiana's road struggles remain unresolved. Next game, Portland Trail Blazers vs Sacramento Kings. This matchup takes us right back to December 18, a game that still feels unfinished because of how chaotic, emotional, and downright bizarre it became. Portland and Sacramento already showed us that when these two teams share the floor, nothing about the final outcome is ever settled early. That first meeting ended with the Kings catching points, Portland entering as favorites, and yet the game spiraling far away from what the spread initially suggested. Portland built what looked like a comfortable advantage, climbing up to double digits, even stretching that margin to about 12 points with roughly a minute left. In most NBA games, that's the moment when fans start checking out. In this one, that's when everything broke loose. Sacramento refused to disappear. They erased that deficit, tied the game late, and forced overtime in a contest that had already defied logic. Even in overtime, separation never arrived. The game stayed tied, possession after possession, until the final chaotic moment when Danny Avdija was fouled with a couple seconds left. 2 free throws. That was it. 2 free throws decided the game, sealing a Portland win that felt surreal rather than dominant. The Trail Blazers escaped with the victory, but the story underneath the final score told something far more important for this rematch. Now the scene shifts back to Sacramento, in what's described as a quick rematch and a back-to-back type spot, and context matters here. Portland has already shown something crucial this season. They have been terrible as favorites, while showing much more reliability when they are underdogs. That trend looms large when you remember they were favorites the last time these teams met and nearly let the game slip completely away. Sacramento, meanwhile, proved they could not only keep up, but legitimately win this matchup. And with the well-worn idea that it's hard to beat a team twice, the Kings come into this one carrying urgency after what's described as a brutal loss. The roster context shifts as well. Zach LaVine is out, and while that might sound like a downgrade at first glance, the way Sacramento's offense operated without him tells a different story. The Kings are loaded with ball-dominant players, LaVine, DeRozan, Russell Westbrook, and removing one of those high-usage pieces was described as addition by subtraction. Without LaVine, the offense flowed cleaner, reads came quicker, and production spread across the floor. The numbers from that previous game underline it clearly. DeRozan dropped 33, Rayod poured in 29, Russell Westbrook added 20, and Keegan Murray finished with 17. That balance wasn't accidental, it was structural. When all of this is layered together, the collapse that never fully punished Portland, the offensive rhythm Sacramento found without LaVine, the emotional edge of returning home, and Portland's documented struggles when favored, the lean points back toward the Kings. Not because of blind loyalty, but because the data from the previous matchup exposed cracks that didn't disappear with a win. In this rematch, Sacramento isn't chasing revenge blindly. They're responding to proof. Next game, Houston Rockets vs Denver Nuggets. This matchup is shaped by repetition, frustration, and the psychological weight of unfinished business. Houston and Denver have already met twice this season, and both times the Nuggets walked away with wins. The first came in Houston, during a cup game, with the Rockets laying -2.5 on their home floor. Denver won that game outright. The second meeting came on December 15, this time in Denver, and once again the Rockets believed the moment had arrived. That game stretched into overtime, and once again, the Nuggets won. Now comes the third chapter, and the question isn't just whether Denver can win again, it's whether winning 3 times in a row against the same opponent is realistic in this spot. The skepticism is clear. The belief that repeating dominance for a third straight time is unlikely forms the backbone of this angle. But there's tension here, because Houston doesn't arrive spotless. The Rockets have lost 3 of their last 4 games, and that stretch includes a loss to the Pelicans, along with a loss to the Dallas Mavericks by 13. That recent skid introduces doubt. Is this a temporary slump, or a regression towards something more average? Those concerns sit uncomfortably alongside the broader season narrative. Houston has already shown they can compete with Denver, pushing one game to overtime and controlling stretches of both matchups. Yet the results haven't followed. Denver, meanwhile, holds home court again, a venue that's traditionally difficult to challenge. And still, the angle persists, fading Denver in Denver, despite how uncomfortable that sounds. The idea isn't rooted in disrespect for the Nuggets, but in the cumulative improbability of dominance repeating itself yet again against the same opponent. There's no ignoring the emotional strain here. Houston enters described as in a slump, and that uncertainty clouds the handicap. But it's precisely that discomfort that defines the lean. When teams meet this frequently in a short window, margins tighten, familiarity breeds resistance, and history starts pressing against probability. Denver has already taken 2 punches and survived. The question becomes whether the third one finally lands. From a spread perspective, the lean drifts toward Houston, not with blind confidence, but with acknowledgement of risk, trend pressure, and the weight of repetition that rarely lasts forever. Next we got game, Charlotte Hornets vs Detroit Pistons. This matchup unfolds at the intersection of momentum and environment. Charlotte arrives playing some of their best basketball of the season, riding a 2-game winning streak and having covered 4 of their last 5 games. That recent surge matters, especially for a team that has struggled to maintain consistency. But context matters even more when you break down where those games are being played and how Charlotte performs when removed from familiar surroundings. Detroit returns home after a narrow, emotionally draining loss in Dallas, falling 116-114 in a game described as close and competitive. That kind of defeat lingers, but it also sharpens focus, especially for a team that has been dominant on its own floor. The Pistons have lost only 2 home games all season, a stat that anchors this entire matchup. Charlotte, by contrast, tells a different story away from home. While they sit at 6-8 at home, they are just 3-10 straight up on the road, a number that casts a long shadow over this contest. Injury uncertainty compounds that road concern. Ston is questionable. Connaughton is questionable. Grant Williams is questionable. That's 3 names surrounded by uncertainty, and when a team already struggles away from home, instability becomes magnified. Detroit, meanwhile, enters this spot with clarity of purpose, back home, off a loss, facing a team that has consistently faltered outside its own building. The willingness to lay points with Detroit stems directly from these conditions. This isn't about fading Charlotte's recent form. It's about recognizing where that form has shown cracks. Detroit's home floor has been a fortress, Charlotte's road play has been a weakness, and the timing aligns with Detroit looking to reassert control after a narrow defeat. That combination leads to this being labeled a smash spot for the Pistons, not because of hype, but because the numbers align cleanly in one direction. From a spread perspective, the lean rests with Detroit. The matchup favors structure over momentum, environment over streaks, and stability over uncertainty. When those elements collide, outcomes tend to follow the foundation rather than the flash. Next game between Phoenix Suns vs Golden State Warriors. This matchup carries with it all the hallmarks of a narrative-driven NBA drama. Just a few days ago, on Thursday, December 18th, these teams met in Phoenix in a contest that was as close as they come. The Suns entered that game at +2 and managed to hold on for a 1-point victory, showing that even small margins can define momentum and perception in this league. That razor-thin result now sets the stage for a quick rematch, a situation that always favors the team that can reset and exploit prior learnings. And in this case, that team is returning home, the Golden State Warriors, who now step back onto their familiar floor with all the advantages that come with comfort, routine, and fan support. Looking at the numbers, the Warriors have had a challenging stretch on the road, going 6-11 straight up away from home. Yet at home, they are a markedly different team, boasting a 7-4 straight up record, a clear sign that this venue amplifies their strengths and mitigates previous weaknesses. The Suns, conversely, struggle away from home, as they carry a losing record on the road. That contrast cannot be overstated when analyzing the potential outcome here. The previous game was decided by 1 point, highlighting just how tight these teams are in direct competition, but also emphasizing the advantage for Golden State now that they are back in familiar territory. Injury dynamics further shape the narrative. Steph Curry did not play in that last encounter due to a thigh issue and enters this rematch as questionable. His status is pivotal, not only for scoring potential but also for floor spacing, pace, and leadership. His absence in Phoenix meant the Warriors had to adjust rotations and rely on other players to fill the gap, a factor that may have contributed to the close finish. If Curry returns, even at less than 100%, the Warriors' offense gains a dimension it lacked in the first game, particularly when matched against a Suns team that, while capable, has struggled to translate their talent consistently on the road. Situational context compounds the drama. This is a revenge spot, a quick rematch, and Golden State is back home, factors that collectively create a narrative where adjustment, familiarity, and urgency collide. The Suns' previous victory was narrow, their road struggles pronounced, and the Warriors' home record strong enough to suggest that the balance could tilt in their favor. In essence, the numbers, the venue, and the situational factors all intersect to frame this game as a high-stakes test for both squads. Analytical observations might even consider potential parlay scenarios where Golden State capitalizes on home advantage while the Suns continue to navigate road inconsistencies, reflecting the tight interdependency of past performance, player availability, and environmental context. At its core, this is a matchup of resilience versus adaptation, margin versus momentum, and preparation versus fatigue. The Warriors lost by 1 point in Phoenix, and now they have a chance to translate that learning into performance at home. The Suns will need to overcome a losing road record and a team that thrives in its own environment, making every possession, every rotation, and every adjustment critical. The drama is palpable, the stakes are clear, and the storyline is as compelling as any in the NBA landscape right now. Next game, Dallas Mavericks vs Philadelphia 76ers. Turning to Philadelphia, the narrative here centers around scheduling strain, momentum swings, and the impact of key player availability. The Sixers are on the back end of a back-to-back, traveling from New York to Philadelphia after facing the Knicks, and then immediately tasked with hosting a Dallas team that is arguably playing their best ball of the season. That combination of travel, fatigue, and timing is not insignificant. The Sixers enter a non-favorable spot in terms of preparation, rest, and mental sharpness. The Mavericks, in contrast, have shown a clear trajectory of success. They have won 6 of their last 8 games, picking up victories over notable opponents, including the Pistons, the Rockets 122-109, the Nuggets by 10, and the Heat by 10. These numbers underscore a team finding consistency, rhythm, and confidence, building momentum that is difficult to ignore. Their recent performance creates an analytical lens in which prior matchups, scoring margins, and defensive efficiency all contribute to a picture of a team peaking at the right time. Player availability plays a crucial role in framing the narrative. Anthony Davis, who has been day-to-day, is expected to play in this matchup, and his presence brings stability, scoring, and leadership to the Mavericks' rotation. His consistency, or lack thereof, could define how the game unfolds, particularly against a Philadelphia roster that may be fatigued from the back-to-back schedule. On the Sixers side, Joel Embiid is questionable with an illness, and Kelly Oubre is out. Those absences remove key scoring and defensive pieces from Philadelphia's lineup, further complicating their path to victory. The situational and statistical elements align to form a compelling narrative. Dallas enters off momentum, Philadelphia is challenged by scheduling and personnel gaps, and the interplay between rested, informed players and uncertain availability could dictate pace, efficiency, and shot selection. Spread leans here would naturally consider the Mavericks' recent success and the Sixers' back-to-back fatigue. Analytical observations might suggest potential scenarios where Dallas leverages their rhythm against a Philadelphia team that may struggle to adjust to rapid transitions, player absences, and a rising opponent. Beyond numbers, this matchup is also about psychological rhythm and momentum management. The Mavericks have faced and beaten quality opponents in recent contests, and their confidence is building with each victory. Philadelphia, while talented, enters at a disadvantage, navigating fatigue, travel, and missing contributors. These conditions create a subtle narrative edge in favor of the Mavericks, not as speculation, but as an analytical observation of trend, timing, and roster realities. In sum, this game represents the convergence of form, schedule, and personnel variables. The Mavericks have momentum, consistency, and expected health on their side. The Sixers face a back-to-back challenge, a long travel stretch, and critical absences in Joel Embiid and Kelly Oubre. When these factors are combined with recent point spreads, prior performances, and the overall trend of Dallas winning 6 of 8, the script is clear. This is a test of endurance, adaptation, and exploiting small but critical advantages that arise from scheduling, player availability, and momentum. The analytical possibilities extend beyond one game, suggesting potential scenarios where performance trends intersect with situational factors to influence outcomes over time. This NBA slate is packed with high-stakes matchups where defense, shooting efficiency, and late-game execution could decide every outcome. By breaking down matchups, player trends, injuries, and statistical edges, we give you the full picture behind every game. At Beyond the Box Score, we analyze every stat, every angle, and every matchup, helping you follow the NBA like a pro. Stay tuned, subscribe, and keep locked in for the most detailed, analytical, and insightful daily breakdowns in the league. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.